Hello, my name is Destiny Waddell, and I will be focusing this presentation on the United States' policy of counterterrorism and the renewal of the United States Patriot Act. The Patriot Act's specific name is the Uniting and Strengthening America by providing appropriate tools required to intercept and obstruct terrorism. Because counterterrorism strategies can be so broad, I have decided to narrow it to the focus on the Patriot Act while still implementing counterterrorism as a whole. To give you some background of the Patriot Act and how it came about, I will begin by talking about the circumstances that brought on the Patriot Act. After the September 11th attack, where al-Qaeda hijacked 4 of our planes, the United States knew they needed to start actually trying to combat terrorism. Before the 9/11 attacks, the United States really had no strategy when it came to dealing with counterterrorism. After the 9/11 attack, President Bush helped write the Patriot Act as a way to try and expand the powers the government has when it comes to combating terrorism. The Patriot Act's original goals were to enhance the penalties that terrorists could receive, increase communication among different intelligence agencies, and gave the FBI and the NSA the ability to access personal information of civilians. Different parts of the Patriot Act could have different expiration rates, meaning that the Congress and the President have to come together and choose whether a piece of the Patriot Act is going to be renewed. Since 2020, there has been debates about whether Congress should choose to renew the Patriot Act or if some of the specific provisions that were created in the Bush administration should be left out of the Patriot Act. One specific provision that is expiring is the expansion of the government's power to conduct surveillance. This comes at a time where Americans feel very indifferently about the Patriot Act due to the perceived risk of it overstepping on our own civil liberties. Agencies such as the National Security Agency have a lot of power when it comes to the Patriot Act, and they are very secretive about the information they are receiving and what they are doing with this information after they get it. The government uses high-tech equipment such as drones and wiretapping devices in order to spy on Americans, and many argue that they are using their powers in a negative way. Instead of spying on a terrorist, Americans fear that the NSA is spying on us. The grand strategy after the 9/11 attacks focused on military primacy and the United States' ability to detect an attack so they can prevent the attack from happening. As stated before, the United States really did not have a policy that targeted terrorism because it was never really a problem before 9/11. Therefore, they had to think of a new way to combat terrorism and found the best way to combat terrorism is to prevent the attack before it happens. The United States came up with the Patriot Act because it expanded the amount of surveillance and communication powers government agencies had. This allowed them to wiretap and use other means of surveillance in order to gather information about a suspected terrorist. These instances have been used to stop some terrorist incidents from taking place and is the reason why the NSA wants the renewal of the Patriot Act to pass in legislation. The fear that terrorists could attack again, especially coming at the same time of the fear of weapons of mass destruction, caused the United States to have the goal of counterterrorism as their strategy. The goal of counterterrorism is still a strategy they use today. The government is still fearful of terrorist groups such as al-Qaeda and ISIS and believe they need the power to continue to conduct surveillance in order to combat their attacks. The War Powers Act is an act that was created to check the president's power when committing the United States to an armed conflict without the consent of Congress. Certain circumstances can really alter how closely the War Act is followed. For instance, in the age of terrorism, after the 9/11 attack, the War Powers Act would have been followed less closely. Public opinion demanded a presidential response, shifting power away from Congress and back to the executive branch. When the Patriot Act first came into legislation, President George W. Bush had a lot of say in what was going to be included in the Patriot Act. His excuse for this expansion of power was that the United States was in a national emergency, so the bill easily bypassed long negotiation talks, which would not have been the case normally. Attacking different terrorist groups and helping foreign countries help fight terrorism was reason for the United States to get involved in armed conflict. The grand strategy of preemption also made it easy for the executive branch to bypass Congress. Today, the president does not have as much say as he previously used to because the act has already been written and major terrorism attacks such as 9/11 have not occurred on such a major scale. Congress has more power when it comes to the Patriot Act because Congress is the one voting on whether or not to choose to renew specific legislation or letting legislation expire. Getting involved in different wars due to fighting terrorism is a lot more difficult for the president to do when he wants to bypass Congress. Congress actually did not have a lot of say in the passing of the Patriot Act before President Bush signed it into law. Due to American public opinion, they decided counterterrorism strategies were necessary in order to please the public and try to reduce the amount of fear Americans had. Congress passed the Patriot Act with flying colors. The House of Representatives passed the USA Patriot Act with a 357 to 66 vote. The Senate passed the bill with a vote of 98 to 1. There seems to be somewhat of a mixed opinion in Congress today about the Patriot Act. Some agree with the Patriot Act, as they did during the Bush administration, while others feel that they do not want to expand the act until needed or until revisions of the act are put into place. The president may not have as much of a say regarding the Patriot Act today, but Joe Biden in his senator years actually used to brag about the bill and emphasize how he practically wrote the Patriot Act. The Patriot Act is likely well supported by Joe Biden, and he may be able to influence agencies within the Defense Department and Congress when it comes to their outlook of the bill. The issue of the Patriot Act began to arise again, especially when Donald Trump was president. Trump claimed that he would not support the Patriot Act and he would veto the bill if Congress passed it. This caused many senators to claim they would have voted in a different way if it was not for Trump tweeting that he did not agree with the Patriot Act. Different circumstances can cause Congress to think differently about the Patriot Act. Joe Biden could cause the issue of the Patriot Act to resurface, and he might have enough persuasion power to get Congress to vote in a different way with legislation resurfacing. Regarding the NSA and Edward Snowden, Snowden is the one who caused the Patriot Act to spark a public debate. Snowden released information to the public about how the NSA is abusing their surveillance power and collecting data from Americans that in no way correlates with terrorism. The NSA has been trying to call Snowden a liar and say that his information is inaccurate, trying to reduce his credibility, but American people believe Snowden and think that reform is necessary if the Patriot Act is to continue to exist. As you can see, the Patriot Act actually causes a lot of debate when it comes to privacy over security. Public opinion, when Bush enacted the Patriot Act, was that it was necessary for the United States security because Al-Qaeda was easily able to attack the United States under those circumstances. Americans knew they needed a way to combat terrorism, and at the time did not think their privacy was more important than American security as a whole. Once Edward Snowden leaked information about the NSA and how the NSA is using the collected data, the American people shifted their public opinion. Americans thought the Patriot Act was being used in a positive way and that there were checks and balances that would limit the NSA's power. This was a very inaccurate interpretation. Now Americans seem to value their privacy over national security. There has been revisions of the Patriot Act due to American fears, but different government agencies still have too much power when it comes to combating terrorism. For instance, the NSA can practically request any tangible personal information from any business about a citizen. Americans are fearful that the NSA is gathering this information as a way to spy on American people, instead of foreign terrorists like the Act intended. This fear is why it is so difficult for the government to come up with a decision on whether to expand the Patriot Act or let the legislation expire. Americans do not support it like they did during the Bush administration. Finally, I would like to relate the debate to renew the Patriot Act to rational choice theory. Rational choice theory states that individuals make choices after weighing the costs and benefits of the choice. They will pick the best choice based on what they feel the costs and benefits are. During the Bush administration, the al-Qaeda attack was so recent and so scary that the government felt that American security trumped American privacy. They weighed the costs and benefits and came to the conclusion that stopping terrorist attacks against the United States was more important than individual privacy. At the time, Americans agreed. Now that the United States has not had a major terrorist event in a while, Americans begin to feel indifferently about the government's choice. Americans are still fearful of terrorists, but not to the same extent as they were in 2001. Americans seem to be making a rational choice that privacy trumps the security measures used. But the question to ask is, will the government make the same rational choice, or do they feel that security still trumps privacy? Again, my name is Destiny Waddell, and this was my presentation focusing on the Patriot Act and why it should not be renewed. Thank you.